The calendar turned to my 65th year, marking a milestone that, for me, wasn't just about candles and cake. It was a prompt, a gentle nudge from the universe to heed Arthur's last, whispered advice. Give with warm hands, Eleanor. See the good you do while you're here. My late husband, ever the sage, had always believed in the power of conscious giving, ensuring that blessings weren't merely posthumous, but tangible, felt, and appreciated in life. So I decided it was time. Time to distribute my assets among our three children, Caroline, Thomas, and Sarah. It wasn't about shirking responsibility, but about empowering them, easing their burdens, and preventing the very squabbles Arthur had always dreaded after we were gone. I wanted to see them flourish, to build their futures with the foundation I could provide. This felt right, a final act of love and foresight. I spent days meticulously arranging manila folders on the grand oak dining table, the same table where we'd celebrated countless Christmases and birthdays. Each folder, stiff and substantial, contained the deeds, the portfolios, the carefully worded legal documents that represented a lifetime of Arthur's hard work and my prudent management. My spacious 5-bedroom colonial home, a silent witness to our family's history, felt charged with anticipation. The scent of polished wood and old paper filled the air, mingling with the nervous flutter in my own chest. This wasn't just a distribution of wealth, it was a changing of the guard, a profound shift in our family dynamic. Caroline, my eldest, arrived precisely on time as always. Her punctuality was a hallmark of her driven nature, though today it felt almost predatory. She entered, impeccably dressed, her eyes immediately scanning the room, lingering on the high ceilings, the intricate crown molding, and the wide bay windows of the house she had openly coveted for years. I could see it in the way her gaze softened, then sharpened, a long-held desire betraying a flicker of avarice that she quickly, expertly, masked with a smile. She hugged me a little too tight, her hands patting my back as if staking a claim. Thomas, my only son, shuffled in 20 minutes later, his usual disheveled self, looking more like he'd rolled out of bed than prepared for a momentous family meeting. He mumbled an apology for his lateness, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair, his gaze darting nervously around the room, avoiding eye contact. Thomas had always struggled to find his footing, drifting from one venture to another, never quite settling. My heart ached for him, and part of this decision was driven by a desperate hope that a solid foundation might finally allow him to thrive. Sarah, my youngest, was already there, having flown in from Chicago the night before. She sat quietly in her usual spot at the corner of the table, observing everything with an almost preternatural calm. Sarah had always been the thoughtful one, the quiet observer, the one who saw beneath the surface. Her presence was a balm, a quiet anchor amidst the simmering undercurrents I could sense from her siblings. She offered me a gentle, reassuring smile, a silent acknowledgement of the weight of the day. With everyone gathered, the air thick with unspoken expectations, I cleared my throat, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I've decided to distribute my wealth now, children, I began, looking at each of them in turn, rather than waiting until I'm gone. Arthur always believed in giving with warm hands, and I want to see you all benefit from what your father and I worked so hard for. I explained my rationale, reiterating my desire for their security and happiness, to avoid any potential disputes after my passing. The tension in the room was palpable, a mixture of surprise, relief, and barely contained excitement. I picked up the first folder, my heart thumping. Caroline Abbott, I said, meeting her eager gaze. The family home is yours. A gasp, barely audible, escaped Thomas. Caroline, despite her practiced composure, couldn't completely suppress the flash of triumph that lit her eyes, quickly replaced by a demure nod. I had expected some emotion, perhaps tears, but her reaction felt colder, more like a victory than a heartfelt gift. Still, I pushed the thought away. It was what she wanted, and I was giving it to her. Next, I turned to Thomas. Thomas, you will receive my investment portfolio, along with the vacation property in Maine. His eyes widened, a genuine look of shock and relief washing over his face. The vacation home, a rustic cabin nestled by a sparkling lake, held countless cherished memories for us. I knew the financial security of the portfolio, coupled with the peaceful retreat, would provide him with the stability he desperately needed. He looked at me, for once, with an expression of profound gratitude, a small, hopeful smile appearing on his lips. Finally, I presented Sarah with her share. And Sarah, the rental properties downtown are yours, along with my personal savings, which I know you'll put towards your dream clinic. Her eyes welled up, a quiet joy replacing her earlier composure. She knew how much I believed in her vision, her desire to help others through her medical practice. She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, and for a moment I felt a deep sense of peace, a confirmation that I was doing the right thing. The necessary papers were signed, witnessed, and notarized that very afternoon. The sense of formality slowly melted away, replaced by an artificial lightness. We celebrated that evening with a dinner I had carefully prepared, featuring an expensive bottle of champagne Arthur had been saving for a truly special occasion. We raised our glasses to new beginnings, to family, to a future where my children were, I believed, set for life. I felt a profound sense of relief. The weight of responsibility finally lifted from my shoulders. As we cleared the dishes, the clinking of porcelain and the murmur of polite conversation filling the kitchen. Sarah approached me. Her voice was barely a whisper, her brow furrowed with a concern that seemed out of place in the celebratory atmosphere. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" she asked, her gaze searching mine. I patted her hand, reassuring her with a smile, confident in my decision. "Of course, dear, it's time." It was then, as I turned to put a plate in the dishwasher, that Caroline's voice cut through the air, casual yet piercingly sharp. "So, Mom," she began as if discussing the weather, "when do you think you'll move out?" The question caught me completely off guard. The plate almost slipped from my grasp. My heart lurched, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Move out? I had just given her the house, not signed my eviction papers. I stammered, searching for a reply, but before I could form a coherent sentence, Carolyn continued, her voice gaining an unsettling edge. She took my arm, not gently, and led me out of the kitchen, through the den, and towards the attached two-car garage. "Come on, I'll show you." My mind raced, trying to comprehend what she meant. She opened the door to Arthur's workshop, a sanctuary he had meticulously organized, filled with the scent of sawdust and the memory of his contented tinkering. It had remained untouched since his passing, a sacred space. "We can convert this," she said, gesturing vaguely around the room, which housed Arthur's workbench, his beloved tools and shelves crammed with projects, "into your space, Mom." The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My space? In the garage? It was then that her voice dropped, losing all pretense of warmth and becoming chillingly precise. "After all," she said, her eyes fixed on mine with an unnerving lack of emotion, "the garage is all you need, Mom." The words hit me like a physical blow, the celebration, the warmth, the champagne, all evaporated, leaving behind a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. I stood there, rooted to the spot, staring at the dust motes dancing in the dim light of Arthur's workshop, the echo of her words reverberating in my ears. The warm hands I had extended had been met with a cold, calculating slap across the face. I spent a sleepless night in the master bedroom, the once familiar walls now feeling alien and hostile. Carolyn's words replayed over and over, each iteration stripping away another layer of my dignity. The house I had called home for 40 years, the very foundation of my life, was no longer mine. And I, its matriarch, was being relegated to a corner of the garage. The sheer audacity, the callousness, the complete lack of respect was stunning. I questioned everything, my judgment, my intentions, my entire future. The warmth I had hoped to engender had instead sparked an unexpected, burning ember of anger and resolve deep within me. This was not how my story was meant to end. This was not the legacy I intended to leave, nor my dignity was at stake, and I knew with a certainty that settled like ice in my veins that I could not let this stand. 2 weeks. It had only been 2 weeks since I had signed away my life, my home, my legacy, with what I believed were warm hands. Now I stood in my new suite, the garage. It was a minimal space, hastily converted, stripped of Arthur's tools and the comforting scent of sawdust. A twin bed, a relic from the guest room, was crammed into one corner. A flimsy shower curtain, patterned with cheerful yellow ducks, served as the pathetic barrier for a makeshift shower, connected with the hoses to the outdoor spigot. A single window high up near the ceiling offered a narrow strip of the world outside, a constant reminder of my confinement. From that small, elevated window, I watched, my heart aching, as my life's possessions were carted away. Moving trucks, large and impersonal, pulled up to the main house. I saw burly men directed by Caroline and her husband David, meticulously, almost ruthlessly, load piece after piece of my cherished antique furniture. The mahogany dresser Arthur had gifted me on our 10th anniversary, the velvet armchair where I'd read countless bedtime stories, the ornate dining table that had hosted so many joyous gatherings, all deemed too dated for Caroline's sleek, modern aesthetic. My legacy, my memories, were being discarded like trash, replaced by a cold, contemporary emptiness. Each piece that disappeared into the cavernous truck felt like a piece of my soul being ripped away. One afternoon, a sudden thirst prompted me to seek water from the kitchen tap, a habit ingrained over 4 decades. I tried my old key in the back door, the one that had always let me into my own home. It didn't turn. It simply met with a dull, unyielding resistance. I tried again, harder, a cold dread beginning to seep into my bones. Caroline's voice, sharp and unsympathetic, cut through the silence as she emerged from the den. "Oh, Mom," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "We changed the locks for security, you know, with all the new things we're bringing in." Security. The word hung in the air, a thinly veiled insult. The message was clear. I was no longer a part of that security. I was an outsider. She gestured towards the side door leading directly into the garage. "You can use the garage door from now on." Then with a flourish, she unveiled a mini fridge she'd placed by my twin bed. "And I got you this, for your drinks and snacks. You won't need to bother coming inside." My throat tightened. I felt infantilized, reduced to a child incapable of navigating a shared space, provided with a tiny appliance like a pet kept in its designated corner. Her 2 children, Liam and Olivia, my grandchildren, were bright, curious souls. But even they were co-opted into this new bizarre arrangement. I overheard Caroline instructing them, her voice stern. "Remember, leave Grandma alone when she's in her room." Her room, the garage. The words felt like a brand, marking my new diminished status. The children, usually so eager for a story or a hug, now eyed my garage door with a mixture of confusion and distance. Then came the demands. One morning, Carolyn breezed into my garage space, her phone already pressed to her ear. "Mom, I have an important lunch meeting today. You'll need to watch the kids." It wasn't a request, it was an order. My protests, a faint murmur about my own plans, were steamrolled by her urgent tone and the slam of the garage door as she left. By noon, Liam and Olivia, their little stomachs rumbling, started asking about lunch. "Grandma, I'm hungry," Liam whined, tugging at my shirt. "What's for lunch?" Olivia echoed, her eyes wide. I froze. I had no access to the kitchen, no ingredients, no means to prepare a proper meal. My mini fridge contained only a carton of milk and a banishing wilting apple. The realization hit me with the force of a punch. I was utterly dependent, utterly powerless. Desperate, I pulled out my phone. "Pizza," I announced, trying to infuse some enthusiasm into my voice. It was the only solution. As we waited for the delivery, Liam, ever the innocent, looked at me with genuine confusion. "Grandma, why would Grandma live in a garage?" Olivia chimed in. "Yeah, why don't you live in the house anymore?" Their innocent questions were like daggers, each one twisting in my heart. How could I explain? How could I articulate the callousness of their own mother without tarnishing her image in their young minds? I mumbled something about needing my own space, a quiet place to work, a flimsy excuse that even I didn't believe. Their faces remained unconvinced, mirroring my own inner turmoil. Caroline returned hours later, her important lunch meeting, apparently having stretched into a leisurely afternoon. She swept into the garage, her gaze immediately landing on the pizza boxes, now half empty, strewn across the makeshift table. Her face hardened, a frown marring her perfectly made-up features. "Pizza," she snapped, her voice laced with disapproval. "Eleanor, why would you feed them this junk food? You know how important healthy eating is for their development." Her words were a fresh wound, a criticism that felt designed to further diminish me, to highlight my perceived failings even in my exile. That night, as the cold seeped through the uninsulated walls of the garage, I pulled Arthur's old cardigan tighter around me. It still carried a faint scent of him, wood smoke, pipe tobacco, and something uniquely Arthur. I lay on my twin bed, staring at the dimly lit ceiling, the cold seeping not just into my bones but into my spirit. A profound loneliness washed over me, a chilling realization of how isolated I had become. "Oh, Arthur," I whispered into the darkness. "If only you were here, you would know what to do." The thought of him in his sensible, warm hands brought a fresh wave of tears. The next morning, I woke with a severe fever and chills that racked my body. My head throbbed, my throat felt raw. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy with weakness. I texted Caroline, a simple plea. "Fever, chills. Could you bring some tea and Tylenol, please?" 3 hours crawled by. No response. The silence from the main house was deafening, crushing. My fever climbed, my muscles ached, and a terrifying sense of helplessness began to set in. With trembling hands, I tried again, calling Thomas and Sarah, desperate for any help, any sign of concern. Thomas, when he finally answered, was apologetic. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm in Boston for a client meeting. I can't leave." "Are you okay? Should I call an ambulance?" His concern was genuine, but his distance was a harsh reality. Sarah, however, called back immediately, her voice sharp with worry. "Mom, what's wrong? Why haven't you been in the house? What's going on with Caroline?" Her rapid-fire questions, though fueled by anxiety, were a comfort. At least someone cared. It was almost noon when Caroline finally appeared. She stood in the doorway of the garage, her expression neutral, a small bottle of Tylenol and a lukewarm mug of tea in her hand. She kept her distance, as if my illness were contagious, and handed them to me without a word. "I warmed up some soup," she offered, her voice flat. "It's in the mudroom microwave if you want it." She didn't wait for a reply, simply turned and left, leaving me once again alone in the cold, dusty garage. I lay in bed, the meager offerings untouched. My body ached, but it was my heart that truly felt broken. How had my own daughter become so cold, so distant, so utterly devoid of compassion? How had I, Eleanor, a mother, a wife, a grandmother, become a burden, an inconvenience to be shunted aside and ignored? The warmth I had tried to give had curdled into a bitter, icy abandonment. The following day, a fitful sleep brought some relief. My fever had finally broken, leaving me weak and drenched in sweat, but the searing aches in my body had receded. Physically, I was on the mend, but my spirit remained crushed, a fragile bird with broken wings. The chilling indifference from Caroline, the stark reality of my exile in the garage, gnawed at me. I was a prisoner in my own home, a discarded relic. Feeling a sliver of strength return, I decided to tackle the chaos of my hastily packed boxes, piled haphazardly in my garage suite. Perhaps bringing some order to the clutter would bring some order to my mind. As I sifted through old photo albums, forgotten trinkets, and books, my fingers brushed against the smooth, aged wood of an old cedar chest tucked away at the bottom of a particularly large box. Arthur's chest. It had always been kept locked, a repository of his private memories, something he never permitted me to open. Not out of secrecy, but out of a deep respect for his personal space. A faint memory stirred. I recalled Arthur's casual mention of the key nestled carefully with his gold cufflinks in his dresser drawer. A pang of bitterness shot through me. Those cufflinks, that dresser, indeed all of his personal effects, would undoubtedly have been summarily discarded by Caroline during her renovations, deemed too old-fashioned for her modern tastes. The thought spurred a defiant spark. If the key was gone, I would find another way. My mind drifted back to Thomas, to his rebellious teenage years, a phase where he dabbled in amateur magic and, rather alarmingly, lockpicking. He'd once boasted about picking the old shed lock with a hairpin. I reached for the simple bobby pin holding my thinning gray hair back, straightening it with trembling fingers. With a surprising steadiness, I inserted the makeshift tool into the fragile brass lock on the cedar chest. I wiggled, pushed, and prodded, remembering Thomas's confident instructions. A soft click echoed in the silence of the garage. The lock gave way. Inside, a treasure trove awaited. Photo albums I'd never seen, filled with pictures of a younger Arthur, of his parents, of landscapes from his travels before we met. There were old letters bound with faded ribbons and official-looking documents. And then, nestled amidst these forgotten memories, I found it. A thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with red wax, bearing Arthur's distinctive, elegant handwriting. It was addressed simply to me, to my dearest Eleanor, to be opened when all seems lost. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably. All seemed lost. The phrase resonated with crushing accuracy. Had Arthur, with his uncanny foresight, somehow foreseen this betrayal, this degradation? Had he known even then that a day would come when his beloved wife would be exiled to a garage by her own daughter? A strange mixture of dread and burgeoning hope filled me. Carefully, reverently, I broke the fragile wax seal. I unfolded the letter, its aged paper smelling faintly of sandalwood and Arthur's study. His words, written in his familiar hand, seemed to come alive, his calm, reassuring voice echoing in my mind. "My dearest Eleanor," the letter began, "if you are reading this, I am gone, and something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. I trust in your strength and your judgment, but I also know the fragility of human nature, even within our own flesh and blood." He continued, his words a precise and loving map through the minefield I found myself in. He wrote of his fears about our children, Caroline with her relentless ambition and sharp edges, Thomas with his kind heart but his chronic instability, and Sarah, my thoughtful, quiet Sarah, who, he feared, might be too gentle to advocate for herself or for me when confronted with the stronger personalities of her siblings. Arthur had seen them, truly seen them, in a way I had perhaps been too blinded by maternal love to fully acknowledge. Then came the revelation that made my breath catch in my throat. Arthur, ever the meticulous planner, the protector, had foreseen everything. "Eleanor," he wrote, "I made sure to include a crucial clause in the property transfer documents. Turn to page 4, paragraph 3, subsection B. It explicitly states that all assets transferred to the children can be reclaimed by you if you are not treated with continued well-being and respectful treatment. I wrote it vaguely to allow for your discretion, but rest assured, my love, you have the legal right to revoke these gifts if our children forget their duty to you." My mind reeled, a revocation clause. Arthur, my brilliant, protective Arthur, had created a fail-safe, a lifeline, even from beyond the grave. He hadn't just given with warm hands. He had woven in a protective warmth that would last long after his own hands had grown cold. But he wasn't finished. There was more. "And one last thing, my dearest," he continued. "There is a safety deposit box at the First National Bank. Number 473. Inside, you will find the deeds to a modest house at 1752 Willow Creek Road. It's a quiet place purchased years ago, unknown to the children. Along with it, you will find substantial funds, more than enough for your comfort and security should you ever need to start anew. A modest house, substantial funds, a hidden sanctuary, a secret foundation built purely out of his unending love and foresight. The children had no idea. The thought was both devastating and exhilarating. Arthur's letter concluded with a profound message that resonated deep within my bruised soul. "Eleanor, my love, protect yourself. Love is given freely, but respect must be earned. Our children, if they have indeed failed you as I fear, have lost the right to your generosity. Use this power wisely, not for vengeance, but for justice and your own peace of mind." I pressed the letter to my chest, a choked sob escaping my lips. It wasn't a sob of despair, but of overwhelming relief, of profound gratitude. The crushing weight of abandonment, of being a helpless burden, began to lift, replaced by a surge of hope, a spark of righteous anger. Arthur, even in death, was still looking after me. I looked back into the cedar chest. In a cleverly hidden false bottom, beneath a thin piece of wood, I found it. A small, intricately designed brass key etched with the number 473, the safety deposit box. With renewed purpose, I dug through the ball of documents I had hastily brought from the house. I found the copies of the signed transfer papers. My eyes, no longer clouded by despair, meticulously scanned the dense legal jargon. Page 4, paragraph 3, subsection B. There it was, clear as day, a seemingly innocuous clause lost amidst pages of legalese, but potent with Arthur's protective intent. Grantor retains the right to revoke all herein transferred assets upon demonstrable failure of the grantee to provide continued well-being and respectful treatment to the grantor. Arthur had not only outmaneuvered Caroline, but he had done so with an elegance and quiet brilliance that truly moved me. He hadn't just given me an escape, he had given me the power to reclaim my life. The morning sun, usually a source of irritation through the garage's high window, now felt like a spotlight on a burgeoning new chapter. I woke with a sense of purpose that had been absent for weeks. Arthur's letter, tucked carefully beneath my pillow, was a constant reminder of the power I now held. My first move needed to be decisive, quiet, and entirely my own. I called a taxi, deliberately not informing Caroline. There was no need to explain my movements. Not anymore. My time for explanations was over. The taxi dropped me at the First National Bank, a grand, imposing building that suddenly felt less intimidating. With key 473 clutched tightly in my hand, I approached the safety deposit boxes. The process was swift and discreet. The box held exactly what Arthur had promised: the crisp official deeds to a property, several bank statements showing substantial balances in accounts I didn't know existed, and a small, shining set of keys. Arthur had truly thought of everything, anticipating every possible scenario, every contingency. From the bank, I directed the taxi to 1752 Willow Creek Road. My heart raced, a drumbeat of anticipation and a flicker of trepidation. What would I find? Another disappointment? Or the sanctuary Arthur had envisioned? We drove through a charming, tree-lined neighborhood, a stark contrast to the sprawling manicured estates of my former home. Each turn brought a new wave of emotion, a mix of anxiety and burgeoning hope. The taxi finally pulled up to a modest, single-story ranch house. Blue shutters framed clean, white windows, and a well-maintained garden, bursting with spring blooms, spoke of a home cared for with quiet diligence. It was unassuming, peaceful, and utterly charming. A sanctuary. Arthur had truly created this just for me. A lump formed in my throat, a mixture of profound gratitude and sorrow for the man who had loved me so completely. I stepped out of the taxi, the key feeling strangely heavy and light at the same time. It slid perfectly into the lock, a satisfying click echoing the turning of a new page in my life. The door swung open, revealing a clean, bright interior, albeit completely unfurnished. The air was fresh, devoid of the dust and neglect of my garage room. It wasn't the grand colonial, the house that now felt like a cage, but it was perfect. It was entirely my own, a testament to Arthur's enduring love, a symbol of independence. I walked through the rooms, each step a discovery. 3 cozy bedrooms, 2 surprisingly modern bathrooms, a brand new kitchen with gleaming countertops, and a sunroom overlooking the blossoming garden. The possibilities unfurled before me. I could choose my own furniture, paint the walls any color I wished, fill the shelves with my own books, my own memories. This was a blank canvas, a chance to rebuild not just a home, but a life. I imagined quiet mornings with a cup of tea in the sunroom, evenings spent reading in a comfortable armchair, free from the constant shadow of Caroline's demands. I spent hours sitting on the polished hardwood floor in the living room, the silence a welcome balm after weeks of emotional turmoil. My mind, usually a chaotic swirl of hurt and anger, began to clear. I contemplated my next move. Should I confront Caroline directly, unleash the full force of Arthur's protective claws? Or should I simply slip away, find my peace in this quiet haven, and let them discover their loss in due time? The idea of peace was incredibly appealing, but the injustice of their actions still simmered beneath the surface. Reluctantly, as dusk began to fall, I locked up the house, the click of the lock, a promise of future returns. I called another taxi, directing it back to the garage, back to the temporary prison I still inhabited. I needed time to plan, to strategize, to let the full weight of Arthur's gift sink in. I couldn't act impulsively. As the taxi pulled into the driveway, Caroline's sleek black Irish car was already there, a visible sign of her presence and her ownership. I braced myself. She emerged from the main house, her arms crossed, an air of barely concealed annoyance about her. "Where have you been, Mom?" she demanded, her voice sharp, though feigning concern. "I've been trying to reach you. The children were looking for you." The children were her go-to excuse, a way to cloak her control in a veneer of maternal worry. "Personal matters," I replied, my voice, to my own surprise, imbued with a newfound confidence. The words felt like a shield, deflecting her intrusive questions. The slight widening of her eyes told me she sensed a shift, however subtle. I saw the calculation in her gaze, the realization that I wasn't just a convenient babysitter, but someone who might have a life beyond her beck and call. "Well," she continued, her tone softening slightly, morphing into something resembling business, "David and I were talking. We think it's time to formalize our arrangement." My blood ran cold. Formalize our arrangement. "You know, with a written agreement about your responsibilities here." She gestured vaguely towards the house, then back at the garage. "Babysitting, of course. Light housekeeping in the main areas. And the gardening could really use your touch." The words hung in the air, each one a fresh insult. Responsibilities. Agreement. Unpaid servant. Not a mother, not a cherished matriarch, but a live-in maid and childcare provider, confined to the garage, earning my keep with menial labor. The casual indifference with which she spoke, as if discussing a new employee, was breathtaking. Caroline, oblivious or perhaps simply indifferent to the storm brewing within me, continued blithely. "David's lawyer can draw something up next week. It'll make things easier for everyone." Then, without missing a beat, she shifted gears. "Oh, and Mom, can you make your famous lasagna for dinner guests tomorrow night? I told them you'd be happy to." I mumbled a non-committal response, my mind reeling. I escaped into the garage, closing the door softly behind me. I sank onto my twin bed, Arthur's letters still nestled in my pocket, a powerful talisman. The weight of Caroline's latest proposal settled upon me, heavy and suffocating. But it wasn't despair that filled me now. It was a cold, hard resolve, a clear decision formed, solidifying in my mind. I would reclaim my dignity. I would use Arthur's foresight, his incredible gift, not just for my own peace, but for a reckoning. They had taken everything, believing me powerless. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The next morning, I woke with the clarity and determination I hadn't felt since Arthur's passing. The lethargy, the grief, the self-pity that had clouded my days were gone, replaced by a steely resolve. I would not sign Caroline's proposed agreement. I would not become her unpaid servant, confined to a glorified shed. My dignity, once battered, now stood tall, re-energized by Arthur's protective foresight. But I knew I needed to be strategic. Caroline, with her keen eye for manipulation and control, would sense any deviation from my newfound compliance. If she suspected my true intentions, she would undoubtedly attempt to thwart me, to block my access to the outside world, to isolate me further. No, I had to play her game, at least for a little while longer. I adopted a pleasant, almost docile demeanor. When Caroline, with a theatrical sigh, finally unlocked the back door to allow me access to the kitchen for the fabled lasagna, I entered with a serene expression. I moved through the once familiar space, now feeling alien under her watchful eye, pretending that this temporary reprieve was a generous gift. I chopped onions with careful precision, browned the meat, and meticulously layered the noodles, ricotta, and rich tomato sauce, fulfilling Caroline's expectation of my proper role. Each careful stir, each measured ingredient, was a quiet act of defiance, a silent promise to myself that this charade would not last. That evening, the house was filled with the artificial laughter and clinking glasses of Caroline's dinner party. I moved among her friends, serving the steaming lasagna, refilling wine glasses, and even offering polite conversation when addressed. I played the part of the doting grandmother, the gracious hostess, the harmless, slightly eccentric old woman, content in her little garage apartment. I plastered a polite smile on my face, even when Caroline, in a particularly condescending tone, explained my presence to her friends. Mom's just so happy in her little garage apartment, she chirped, patting my hand with a patronizing air that made my stomach churn. She loves her own space, you know. I simply smiled, a tight, fixed smile, and bit my time. Every moment of humiliation fueled the fire in my belly. The next morning, with Caroline and David off to work and the children at school, I made my move. Instead of venturing into the main house, I walked to the end of the street, to the small corner store with an old, battered payphone. It felt like a relic from another era, but it offered the privacy I needed. I dialed the number from Arthur's old business card, the one for his longtime attorney, Mr. Charles Foster. "Hello, Mr. Foster's office," a receptionist answered. I identified myself, and after a moment, she scheduled an appointment for me that very afternoon. "He has a rare opening at 2 o'clock, Mrs. Hayes." A rare opening. It felt like fate. At precisely 2 o'clock, I sat in the plush leather armchair in Mr. Foster's elegant office. Mr. Foster himself, a man in his late 60s with kind eyes and a neatly trimmed gray beard, rose to greet me, his expression a mixture of surprise and genuine welcome. "Eleanor," he said, extending a hand, "it's been too long. I'm so sorry about Arthur. How have you been?" His voice was gentle, a stark contrast to the harshness I had grown accustomed to. I clutched my purse, my knuckles white, and took a deep breath. "Mr. Foster," I began, my voice a little shaky at first, "I'm afraid I haven't been well, and my living conditions, they are far from ideal." I briefly, clinically, described my exile to the garage, the lack of access, the makeshift facilities, Caroline's demands. As I spoke, I watched his face. His usual composed demeanor faltered. His brow furrowed in a visible discomfort, a hint of professional outrage, flickered in his eyes. Once I finished, I cut to the chase. "Arthur mentioned a clause, Mr. Foster, in the property transfer documents. Something about continued well-being and respectful treatment." I searched his face for confirmation, for the validation that Arthur's words weren't just a desperate dream. Mr. Foster nodded slowly, his expression now serious and focused. "Yes, Eleanor." He was quite insistent on that. "We called it the protective clause. Section 4, Chapter 3B. Daniel," he referred to Arthur by his middle name, a sign of their long-standing relationship, "was always a man of immense foresight, and he was deeply concerned about your future." He leaned forward, his hands clasped on his desk. "The clause makes all assets transferred to the children contingent upon the recipients providing you with appropriate care, accommodation, and respect. It was designed to ensure you would always be taken care of should, shall we say, unforeseen circumstances arise. And living in a poorly insulated garage with limited access to my own home, reliant on a mini fridge and a garden hose shower, Mr. Foster," I asked, my voice quiet but firm, "does that qualify as inappropriate accommodation and a lack of respectful treatment?" Mr. Foster didn't hesitate. He shook his head, a look of disapproval etched on his face. "Eleanor, without question, that scenario as you've described it unequivocally violates the terms of the protective clause. It's precisely what Arthur wished to prevent." He then paused, his gaze softening. "Eleanor, I must warn you, pursuing this could be confrontational, especially with Caroline. She is a formidable personality." "I am aware, Mr. Foster, I replied, my voice steady, betraying no hint of the turmoil within. "But I need to know my options. I need to understand what can be done." Mr. Foster nodded, a glint of respect in his eyes. He then outlined the legal process, explaining that we would need to formally notify the children, present evidence of the breach, and demand the return of the assets. He assured me with a confidence that bolstered my spirit that Arthur's thoroughness, his meticulous phrasing of the clause, meant it would undoubtedly hold up in court. The game was about to begin. Over the next 2 weeks, a quiet transformation took place within me. The hurt and despair that had once dominated my days were slowly replaced by a focused, methodical determination. I meticulously built my case, a silent, unseen rebellion brewing beneath the surface of my docile facade. Every slight, every dismissive comment, every cold shoulder became a piece of evidence. I began to document my living conditions with an almost clinical detachment. Using my old flip phone, I discreetly took photos of the cramped garage, the flimsy shower curtain, the sad little twin bed. I started a detailed journal, carefully noting dates and times, recounting Caroline's condescending remarks, her demands, and the emotional impact they had on me. I even unearthed an old cassette recorder, a relic from the past, and with a tremor in my hand managed to record several dismissive conversations with Caroline, her voice, sharp and unsympathetic, now captured as irrefutable proof. While gathering evidence of my present indignity, I also diligently prepared for my future freedom. I made several clandestine trips to the bank, opening a new personal account and transferring Arthur's substantial funds into it, ensuring they were beyond Caroline's reach. The Willow Creek house became my secret haven. I visited it multiple times, each visit a step closer to making it my own. I measured windows for curtains, envisioned furniture layouts, and felt the first stirrings of excitement about creating a true home again. Knowing Caroline's avaricious nature and fearing she might try to lay claim to this new property once she discovered its existence, I hired a trusted handyman to install new, heavy-duty deadbolts on all the doors, sturdy window locks, and a comprehensive security system. This house, unlike the last, would be truly mine, safe and impenetrable. Amidst my preparations, I knew I needed to gauge my other children's positions. Would Thomas and Sarah support me, or would they remain complicit in Caroline's cruel game? I cautiously reached out, starting with Thomas. Our phone call was brief and unsatisfying. He seemed distracted, his mind elsewhere, his responses vague. He mumbled apologies about not being able to visit, citing work commitments and general busyness. He offered a platitude about things working themselves out, but made no concrete plans to see me, no real offer of help. My heart sank, but I wasn't entirely surprised. Thomas had always been one to avoid conflict, to drift rather than confront. Sarah, however, was different. When I called her, her voice, usually so calm, was immediately laced with concern. "Mom, I've been so worried about you," she began, her words a balm to my aching heart. "I called after your fever, but Caroline kept making excuses for why I couldn't come over. Said you needed rest, that you didn't want visitors." "She was lying, Sarah," I confessed, the words tumbling out. "I was desperate for you to visit, for anyone to visit." I paused, taking a deep breath. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. I'm not living in the house anymore. I'm living in the garage." The line went silent for a moment. Then Sarah's gasp filled the air. Her outrage was immediate and fierce, a fire I rarely saw in my usually composed daughter. "The garage? Mom, what are you talking about? That's unacceptable. How could Caroline do something like that?" Her voice rose with indignation. "You gave her that house out of sheer generosity, not so she could banish you to the garage like someone wanted pet." Her words, though filled with anger, were a validation, a confirmation that my feelings were not unfounded. "I know, dear," I said, feeling a warmth spread through me, a sense of not being utterly alone. "But I'm handling it. Arthur left me a way out, a way to reclaim what's mine." "What? What do you mean?" she pressed, her voice urgent. "I'll explain everything soon," I promised, "but I may need your support, Sarah, when things come to a head." "You have it, Mom," she declared without a moment's hesitation, her voice firm with unwavering loyalty. "You absolutely have it. Just tell me what you need and I'll be there, whatever it is." Her unwavering support was a powerful tonic, solidifying my resolve even further. The day before my planned confrontation, I visited Arthur's grave. The cemetery was peaceful, the autumn leaves a riot of red and gold, rustling softly in the gentle breeze. I stood before his headstone, feeling his presence among the quiet beauty. "You knew, didn't you, Arthur?" I whispered, a tear tracing a path down my cheek. "You knew she might do this. You protected me even then." I placed a single yellow rose on his grave, a symbol of our enduring friendship and his foresight. "I'm going to stand up for myself, my love," I vowed, my voice stronger now. "Not out of vengeance, but because it's right, because I deserve dignity." That evening, back in my garage apartment, which no longer felt like a prison but a temporary staging ground, I meticulously arranged all my documentation. The photos, the journal, The recordings, copies of Arthur's letter, and the bank statements, each piece laid out, ready for deployment. My fingers hovered over my phone. It was time. With a deep breath, I composed a text message, sending it to both Thomas and Sarah. The words were simple, yet carried the weight of impending change. Family meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. Caroline's house. Important matters to discuss. Please be there. The stage was set. The morning of the family meeting broke cold and gray, mirroring the tension in my stomach. I woke long before dawn, sleep an elusive ghost. My mind, sharp and alert, rehearsed the coming confrontation, playing out scenarios, anticipating reactions, steeling myself for the inevitable storm. This wasn't just about property. It was about dignity, about asserting my worth. I dressed with careful deliberation. A simple, elegant navy blue dress, one of Arthur's favorites, and his exquisite pearl necklace, a gift from our 30th anniversary. I wanted to appear dignified, composed, utterly unlike the downtrodden garage dweller Caroline believed me to be. Every detail was chosen to convey strength, not vulnerability. By noon, Sarah's rental car pulled into the driveway. Her body language was tense even from a distance, as Caroline, ever the proprietress, greeted her at the front door with a strained smile. Sarah barely exchanged pleasantries before she broke away, heading straight for my garage door. Her hurried footsteps a balm to my waiting heart. I opened the door before she could knock. Sarah didn't speak. She simply wrapped me in a fierce hug, her arms squeezing me tight. As she pulled back, her eyes, filled with concern, scanned my cramped quarters. The twin bed, the flimsy duck-patterned shower curtain, the stark concrete floor. Her face transformed from shock to a simmering fury. "Oh my God, Mom," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "This is worse than I imagined. I don't know what I thought, but not this." Her gaze hardened, anger flashing in her eyes. This is elder abuse, Mom, plain and simple." "I know, dear," I reassured her, my voice calm despite the tremor in my hands. "But it's going to be addressed today, all of it." I squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her palpable outrage. At precisely 1:55 p.m., Sarah and I walked side by side towards the main house. I carried a plain manila folder, thick with the evidence I had meticulously gathered. Carolyn met us at the entrance to the living room, her practiced smile faltering visibly at the sight of the folder in my hands, a flicker of apprehension crossing her face. She tried to recover, her eyes darting between Sarah's furious expression and the innocent-looking folder. Thomas, true to form, arrived 15 minutes late, looking harried and perpetually flustered. He mumbled apologies about traffic and rescheduled meetings, oblivious to the charged atmosphere he was walking into. He settled onto the sofa, looking uncomfortable, clearly sensing the unspoken tension. I stood before them, Sarah standing resolutely by my side, Thomas on the sofa, and Caroline across from me. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. The moment had arrived. I took a deep breath, my voice steady, clear, and unwavering. 3 weeks ago, I began, looking each of them directly in the eye. I made a decision I believed was in the best interest of this family. I gave each of you substantial gifts, gifts intended to provide security, opportunity, and comfort. I paused, letting my words sink in. Then, with a deliberate motion, I opened the manila folder and pulled out the stack of photographs. I handed them to Thomas first, then to Sarah, and finally to Caroline. "Instead," I continued, my voice betraying no emotion, "this is how I've been living for the past 3 weeks." Thomas's eyes widened as he flipped through the pictures, his face, usually placid, visibly contorted with shock and disbelief. Sarah's fury, already present, intensified, her jaw clenched tight. Caroline, however, simply stared at the photographs, her face a mask of practiced indifference, though a faint flush crept up her neck. She remained silent, her arms crossed defensively. Next, I withdrew Arthur's sealed letter. Its cream-colored R, its familiar script, were powerful silent witnesses. "Before he passed," I began, my voice soft but resonant, "Arthur, in his incredible wisdom and foresight, wrote me this letter. He foresaw a time when things might go terribly wrong. I then read portions aloud, his words echoing in the hushed room, his concerns about their natures, his meticulous preparations to ensure my well-being, and his final, powerful affirmation of my strength. A heavy silence descended. It was Thomas, usually the most reserved, who finally broke it. His voice, usually soft, was now thick with anger. "Caroline," he seethed, looking at his sister, his face paling with disbelief. "You put Mom in the garage." "What the hell?" Carolyn, startled by his uncharacteristic outburst, immediately went on the defensive. "She needed less space at her age, Thomas. It made sense. She said she wanted her own space." Her words were a torrent of flimsy excuses, devoid of any genuine remorse. I interjected, my voice quiet but firm, cutting through her bluster. "Caroline, you installed a flimsy shower curtain and a portable toilet in the corner of a concrete room, a room with no insulation or proper heating, and expected me to be grateful for this space. You changed the locks on my home. You relegated me to a workshop as if I were some inconvenience to be stored away." My words hung in the air, undeniable and devastating. Thomas, usually so quiet and conflict-averse, stood up, his face flushed with anger. "This is disgusting, Carolyn. Mom gave us everything, literally everything. And you treated her like this? How could you?" His eyes, usually filled with a distant weariness, now blazed with a fierce, protective indignation. The time for veiled accusations and subtle hints was over. I met Caroline's cold gaze, then looked at Thomas and Sarah, my two children who, in their own ways, had either contributed to or allowed my suffering. "That's why I called this meeting today," I declared, my voice resonating with a newfound authority. I placed the legal papers, the documents Mr. Foster had prepared, on the coffee table. "I'm revoking the transfers. All of them." The gasp that escaped Caroline was audible, a sound of shock and pure, unadulterated disbelief. Thomas stared, his mouth agape. Sarah simply squeezed my hand, her eyes conveying a silent, powerful affirmation. The game was over. The reckoning had begun. The moment I declared my intention to revoke the transfers, the room erupted. Chaos, raw and unfiltered, broke loose. Caroline, her face contorted in disbelief, sprang to her feet, her voice shrill. "You can't do this! The house is mine now! We've already started renovations. Liam and Olivia are settled here." Her words were a torrent of self-preservation, devoid of any genuine understanding of the gravity of her actions. Thomas, usually so reserved, fired questions, his voice laced with confusion and alarm. Sarah, however, remained quietly by my side, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips, a silent testament to her unwavering support. "Caroline," I stated, my voice cutting through her desperate protests, "read the documents yourself. Arthur, in his infinite wisdom, foresaw this possibility." I gestured to the papers on the table. "I am taking back all the assets, not just from you, but from Thomas and Sarah as well." My decision was not about punishing Sarah and Thomas, but about ensuring a clean slate. I needed to start fresh, to make new decisions based on who my children have revealed themselves to be. Words I had rehearsed, words that now felt utterly true. Sarah squeezed my hand in silent support, her nod acknowledging the fairness of my decision, even if it meant she too would lose her gift. Thomas, however, was visibly shocked by the full revocation, his face paling as the implications sank in. Carolyn, her eyes wild, then launched a venomous accusation. "This was all a plan, wasn't it? Some kind of sick test? You wanted to see if we'd fail. You're just trying to manipulate us." Her words, intended to wound, instead severed the last fragile thread of illusion I held about her love. She saw malice where there had only been generosity. I met her gaze directly, my voice firm. "No, Caroline. I gave those gifts out of genuine, unconditional love. I wanted to see you all secure, happy. I was wrong about you. I was profoundly wrong." The admission hung heavy in the air, a painful truth. For a brief, fleeting moment, Caroline's face crumpled, not with remorse, but with the dawning, horrific realization of her loss. The house, the renovations, the comfortable life she had so quickly taken for granted, all of it was slipping away. "Mom, please," she begged, her voice now a desperate plea. a stark contrast to her earlier fury. Think about Liam and Olivia. Their school, their friends. You can't just take their home away. My resolve, however, had hardened into unyielding steel. You should have thought of that, Caroline, before you changed the locks on your own mother and relegated me to the garage. You have 30 days to vacate the property. The words, though delivered calmly, carried the weight of justice. Carolyn, seeing her pleas were useless, made one last, desperate attempt at manipulation. She snatched a framed photograph of Liam and Olivia from the mantelpiece, thrusting it towards me. "What about Liam and Olivia?" she cried, her voice cracking. "You'd throw your own grandchildren out? Do you even care about Zach and Emma?" A small change in character names here from the outline. "My grandchildren are always welcome in any home I choose, Caroline," I replied, my voice unwavering. "But I will not be manipulated by you. This is not about them. This is about your actions." With a guttural cry of frustration, Carolyn stormed out of the house, David, her silent partner in crime, trailing sheepishly behind her. Thomas, watching her exit, ran a hand through his perpetually messy hair, his face etched with genuine remorse. "Mom," he said, his voice quiet, "I had no idea, I swear. If I'd known you were in the garage, I would have done something. I'm so sorry." I looked at him, seeing the true regret in his eyes. He hadn't been malicious, merely absent, distracted by his own struggles. "I know, Thomas," I acknowledged, a flicker of my old maternal affection stirring. "But ignorance sometimes is also a choice." With Sarah's steadfast help and Thomas's apologetic but willing assistance, I began the process of moving into the Willow Creek house. The bare walls, the empty rooms, once felt daunting, but now, knowing they were truly mine, brought a lightness to my spirit I hadn't felt in years. Each piece of furniture placed, each box unpacked, was an act of reclaiming, of healing. Months passed, and I settled into my new home, transforming it into a haven of peace and comfort. I filled my days with activities I truly enjoyed: gardening, reading, painting, taking long walks in the nearby park. I made new friends, people who valued my company, not my assets. Sarah became a regular visitor, her presence a constant source of joy and unwavering support. Thomas, too, started visiting more frequently, offering to fix things around the house, his attempts at atonement both earnest and endearing. My new estate plan was drawn up, ensuring that any future distributions would have even stricter stipulations for respectful treatment. Lessons learned the hard way. About a year later, a car pulled into my driveway. It was Caroline. She looked disheveled, her usual polished veneer gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability. She sat on my porch, tears streaming down her face, admitting she had made a terrible mistake. She spoke of the struggles of living without the house, the financial strain, the loss of her comfortable life. She begged me for the house back. I listened patiently, my heart aching with a complex mix of sadness and resolve. "Caroline," I finally said, my voice gentle but firm, "this isn't punishment. This is consequence. You had the chance to treat your mother with respect, and you chose not to. That house was a gift, conditional on that respect." I explained my decision to sell the Colonial, to use the proceeds to secure my future, and to ensure my new will prevented such an egregious situation from ever happening again. One afternoon, a few weeks later, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Caroline. It was short, hesitant. "Mom, I've been seeing a therapist. I know I hurt you. Could we talk? Just talk?" I looked at the message, a long sigh escaping me. My journey had taught me the importance of boundaries, but also the enduring power of compassion. My heart, once shattered, had healed, and in its resilience, found a new capacity for forgiveness, on my terms. I texted back, "Saturday, 2 p.m. I'll make tea." I smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. I had found my way back to myself, stronger, wiser, and more dignified than ever. Arthur, I knew, would be incredibly proud. This new life, this new home, was truly mine, a testament to enduring love and the strength of the human spirit.